maybe start. And I will turn it to Laura Wells, our Alameda County a Green and organizer, to begin the next session, which is called, it's a presentation called GPCA Response to Presidential Elections Outcome.
Okay, thank you, Nasim. So we're about 6 minutes early, and my name is Laura Wells. I live in Oakland in Alameda County, and I want to welcome everybody to the Green Party. And I'm going to read my remarks. I almost never do that, but there are some things that I just want to make sure that I say. So I would like to announce that the Green Party is alive and well, despite all of the slings and arrows that we get, especially in a presidential year. And I want to say that I believe a case could be made for the fact that, against great odds, the Green Party is the most successful, truly progressive political party across the United States. And it has been since it became ballot qualified in California 28, almost 29 years ago in 1992. Not only has the Green Party elected people to office, including city councilors and mayors, but we have achieved ballot access in 90% or more of the 50 states, despite increasing hurdles that have been put in our way by this destructive two-party system. And even when we run for office and do not win, we serve our country as the most successful progressive think tank in the nation. We're like an activist progressive think tank that distributes our ideas actively through our campaigns. We have been at the front line pushing for revolutionary reforms that looked very unlikely until they passed, such as legalization of marijuana and marriage equality. We have also been breaking the waves in pushing for ideas that have become known and approved of by the public, such as the Green New Deal, the real Green New Deal, and climate action policies, public banking, and Medicare for all. This weekend, in this Zoom, we have Greens who have been key players in making what I've just said happen. So we, the Green Party, will continue. The Green Party will not stop. We are now pushing for reparations and for revolutionary reforms in the area of policing, of justice, and of reversing the stupendous wealth and income inequality in this country. So let's talk about what happened in California in 2020. At least 26 Greens ran for office, and at least 9 of them won. Emmanuel Estrada, at age 26, won as mayor of Baldwin Park, becoming one of 2 Green mayors in California, along with Marina Mayor Bruce Delgado in Monterey County. Baldwin Park, by the way, is in Los Angeles County. This was Emmanuel's second run, and so perhaps other Green candidates will run again and next time win. The Green Party of California is now taking on the challenges of increasing our voter registration and running great candidates, both in order to maintain our ballot line and to push for green values. The majority of Californians are now in favor of an improved Medicare for all healthcare system, especially in this prolonged pandemic when so many jobs and health insurance benefits have been lost. Californians also want a healthy planet, as well as great education, housing, jobs, and justice. And we know that these ambitions are achievable. There is no excuse for California, nor for the new Biden-Harris administration, no excuse for them not to have already moved forward on these basic needs. Again, the Green Party is alive and well. Now, next on the agenda, but we're so far ahead of time, I'm not sure they've arrived yet. We're very lucky we will be very lucky to have two speakers from the National Green Party. And I will give the briefest of introductions to Howie Hawkins and Jill Stein today for this agenda section, because I'll bet everybody knows them, knows who they are and what they stand for, what they've done. And we want to go straight to hearing what they have to say for roughly 5 minutes each that they will be speaking. So with that, we've come to almost the exact time for this to begin. And so I expect that Howie Hawkins and Jill Stein will join us soon.
Laura, Howie has joined us.
Great. Okay, so here's my short introduction for Howie. Howie Hawkins was the Green Party's candidate for president in 2020. So Howie, please unmute yourself if necessary, and please begin.
Well, hello, everybody. I wish I could see you, but first thing I want to say is this was a tough year for us. And I don't think anybody should be discouraged by the results, because we were the victim of a much larger dynamic. This was a referendum on Trump versus not Trump, a guy named Joe Biden, who wasn't running on any issues. He was just not Trump. And if you look back through our history, you can see that the result is determined far more by the larger dynamic than who the candidates are, what our message is, or how well the campaign is organized. You know, you have open seats with unpopular candidates, like 2016, two most unpopular candidates in history, or 2000 coming out of the Clinton administration versus Bush, who was trying to run as the compassionate conservative. We did a lot better. So I think that's the first thing we got to understand. We also got to understand that we were for a Green New Deal, along with over 60% of the American people. Biden and Trump were opposed. We were for Medicare for all, along with over 70% of the American people. In fact, Fox News did an exit poll. 72% they found of the people wanted what they call government-run healthcare. We were for that. Biden and Trump were opposed. A year ago, they polled on a job guarantee. 79% of the American people were for that. We were for that. Biden and Trump were opposed. And then one of the Koch brothers had YouGov do a poll on should we cut the military budget and reprioritize the federal budget to social and environmental protections. 75% of the American people. We were for that. Trump and Biden were opposed. So we were totally excluded. I think the blank out in not just the corporate media, but the progressive media was a reflection of that larger dynamic. The liberals in this country, you know, they used the scare tactics. The prominent intellectuals, we call our radical intelligentsia, they weren't just safe states, they were no states by the end of the campaign. Vote for Biden everywhere because a coup is coming. And being former military, I talked with people at my American Legion post, former Marines I know, that was not happening, but that was part of the scare tactic. So, you know, that larger dynamic is, I think, the way we need to put this in context. And I don't think that'll change for us. And this is something we were talking about in the campaign until the Greens elect not just hundreds, we've elected 1,200 over the years, but thousands to local office and on that foundation to state legislatures and Congress. When we got a caucus in Congress, then our presidential ticket will be not just serious, but competitive. And so, you know, coming out of this campaign, the people we've networked with, we want to help them develop strong locals. We tend to be, as I've been saying, activists who mobilize the usual suspects. We got to learn how to be organizers. I'm going to put in your chat an article about the Australian Greens in Queensland who did this deep canvassing, and it really worked for them. They greatly expanded their base, and they had a great result on October 31st while we were focused on what we're doing. And I think that indicates, the good news out of this campaign. We elected more people. Everybody knows about Emmanuel Strada in Baldwin Park. We ran great campaigns like Jake Conkle in San Jose and Franco Muller-Paz in Baltimore. That was really a breakthrough. They haven't had anybody but Democrats on their city council for 80 years. And she got 35% and really broke through. It was the only competitive race. So here we are, the prospect, the Biden administration is going to be public austerity and low-level conflict all over the world. And McConnell will probably be the co-president. Biden wants to work across the aisle, so he's going to vet everything with McConnell. And so progressives are going to be disappointed. And that's when our time comes, and it's coming fast. I think you saw the reaction to appointing Cedric Richmond for the Office of Public Engagement to pacify the climate movement, but it's not being pacified. So I think we're going to have a lot of opportunities going forward. And, I'm here to help in any way I can. I'm going to put in the chat that article about the Australian Greens, because I think that points the way forward for us. We really got to build a mass base, elect thousands, and build this thing from the bottom up.
And I think that we have Dr. Jill Stein is, I believe, in the Zoom. And so I want to thank Howie for coming to the Zoom and for your remarks. And my very short introduction of Jill Stein is that she was the presidential candidate in 2012 and in 2016. So Jill, please unmute yourself if necessary, and please begin.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So apologies. I had a little bit of technical issues, so I didn't catch all of what Howie said, but most of it, I think, and everything I heard, I want to just totally underscore and agree with. And I'm going to just throw in a few remarks on top of that. And I sort of feel like my role here is to maybe provide a little bit of political therapy and historic perspective, and give a big thanks to everybody that's here today to build the party for people, planet, and peace over profit. And to underscore, as Howie was saying, this work is really timely. It's more critical than ever. And it's really why, in a nutshell, we are still the ones we've been waiting for. Don't believe the propaganda that would tell you otherwise. Consider that propaganda a badge of honor, that we really have arrived as the political threat that the establishment is terrified of, quaking in its boots at, because people are so hungry for what we're all about. And this election is really another symptom of democracy on life support, more corrupted than ever by the big money pouring in, this time $6.5 billion into the presidential race alone, which is over twice as much as the very toxic waterfall, the tsunami of corrupted money that flowed into the 2016 campaign. This was double that, pouring in largely from billionaires, bankers, big tech, the war machine, fossil fuels, the usual suspects. And that's in addition to all the other ways that the game is biased against people and people's politics, voter suppression, lesser evil voting, the fear mongering, restricted ballot access, and more. And it all adds up to keep the economic elite calling the shots, while working people and frontline communities are hanging in by a thread, now struggling to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, to get healthcare in a pandemic, while the billionaires are making out like bandits, gaining $1 trillion just since the pandemic began, on top of an economy where 0.1% had the equivalent of what 90% has. So this is this is a system that is basically collapsing in on itself. The conditions for rebellion are here. The momentum is unstoppable. The largest block of voters is still people who don't vote. And while Biden got a majority, most of his voters were voting against Trump, not for Biden. And I'm not sure, I didn't hear how he quote this one, but a poll done in the fall just before the election showed that even in the hyper-partisan environment, 60% of voters are still saying they want a third party outside of Democrats and Republicans. So people are really hungry for progressive change. Howie cited a bunch of the data that shows, that really underscores, like that 99% of sponsors for the Green New Deal and Medicare for All were reelected, even in swing districts, while centrists like Donna Shalala were not or struggled to barely get in. Progressive change will not come from politics as usual. Just look at the warmongers and the deficit hawks that are the leading contenders of Biden's proposed cabinet or his pending cabinet proposals, his donors that basically now to whom he and the Democratic Party continue to owe their allegiance, and the war on progressives inside of the Democratic Party that's been going on at least since the time of Henry Wallace, when the fire alarm was pulled on his nomination at the Democratic National Convention during the Second World War, all the way through to Bernie Sanders. This goes on. So rebellion is growing. It's here. That's why it's our job more than ever to be the political vehicle, because we are the only political party that is independent, non-corporate, and national in scale. And we're not just changing the debate, we're winning the debate. Just witness how our agenda has really become the go-to agenda for so-called progressives. Democrats will give it lip service, but they can't actually go there because they take the dirty money, they get bought off, and we don't. So we don't have to change people's minds. They're already there. We just need to let them know that we're here. We need to be out there tabling, canvassing, registering new voters, supporting social movements, and running candidates, especially at the local level. I want to echo Howie's thank you to all of the candidates, the 26 in California who did just that. And a special big thanks to Manny and to Jake Tonkel, who came so close. The crisis we're in makes our agenda more essential than ever, and the growing revolt makes our agenda more possible than ever. Ignore the propaganda, take it as a badge of honor. The clock is ticking, the empire's days are numbered. Forget the lesser evil, fight for the greater good, because our lives depend on it more than ever. So we can build that America that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. And the power to do that really is in our hands. It's time to get out there and just do the practical work of getting the word out and organizing. And thanks to everybody for being here today to make that happen.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jill Stein, and thank you again, Howie Hawkins, for being here. I mean, I know, like, as has been mentioned, Chanel and others, it's so wonderful to get together in person and miss that. But one of the things that can happen because it's online and on Zoom is that we are able to have you from New York and Massachusetts right here today. So, and thank you for your deeply felt and experienced participation, and for sharing the insights that you've learned along the way. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the facilitators. That would be Nassim and James for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I am more inspired now than before the elections because of, hearing the words of our iconic fighters. This is a fight. We had a question in the chat, which is really interesting, is maybe asking how can you tell us, for some of us who might not be aware or know the details of how you became the first person who brought the Green New Deal into this country after it was developed outside of our country based on our own history. It's an interesting history, and the real Green New Deal that the Democrats have massacred.
Well, what we call the Green New Deal is something we've been talking about in the anti-nuclear safe energy movement since we formed the Clamshell Alliance in the 1970s. And the phrase Green New Deal, I actually tried to get a plank in the Green Party USA platform. We had 2 Green parties in 2000, and they weren't having it. New Deal, that's too democratic. So there's a plank called the Global Green Deal, which was about anti-poverty and clean energy investments, globally, what we now call a Global Green New Deal. But then the Green Party of England and Wales, Caroline Lucas, started talking about a Green New Deal coming out of the Great Recession in 2008. And the European Greens picked that up in their campaign in 2009 for the European Parliament. So then the Greens asked me to run for governor, and we'd run personalities. Nobody knew me, and I'm like, oh man. So I said, we should say we're campaigning for a Green New Deal. And the Greens were saying, oh, that's too Democratic Party. And then I could point to the European Greens and the British Greens, and it became our theme. And by August, we had 62 Greens around the country. Some people out there in California pulled together a list, and we had a federal Green New Deal that not only talked about, like we were, what we could do in New York, but was talking about a federal Green New Deal, which included deep cuts in military spending to fund the investments in the new green economy. So, and then, I ran on in 2010, and a lot of Greens picked it up. Jill's theme was a Green New Deal for America. And then the Sunrise Movement and the Democratic Party took the slogan, diluted the content. I can go into the details on that, but basically eliminated the ban on fracking and extended the deadline. They never voted on it in the House. When they voted on it in the Senate, all the Democrats voted president, except 4 voted with the Republicans no. And then after Biden got the nomination, he buried the Green New Deal. You can't even find it in the Democratic Party. And he ran away from it, even though you look down ballot, like Jill was talking about the people running, I think she said Medicare for all. It's like 91 of 92 Democrats that ran for Congress on a Green New Deal won. So it's popular, but that's why we need the Greens out here, to keep everybody honest about what the Green New Deal is.
Thank you very much. I see that Jan Arnold has her hand up.
Eric, on process.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, just because I volunteered to be timekeeper, I just need to get a sense from the facilitators based on the time they think we have of how much time for questions and comments and how much time for the presenters' responses.
I think let's go with 1 and 2 minutes, if that's okay by everybody, but let's keep it flexible because we actually have quite a lot of time. So we'd love to hear as much as possible from our presenters. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael Rubin. And you need to unmute yourself, please, Michael.
All right. I wanted to ask Howie a question. I know that Howie and much of the inner circle of his campaign staff are going to continue, and I would like him to talk about their plans for the future. As a matter of fact, I think that they're talking about sort of organizing themselves, and I was wondering if Howie could talk about that. Over.
Yeah, I just got off a campaign team meeting where we were talking about that. And what we want to do is pull together the people who came together for the campaign inside the Green Party. And there are a number of independent socialist groups that endorsed us. Frankly, I don't think there's much there, but we're going to invite them and have some kind of network, Zoom calls where people can compare notes. And the purposes will be to help locals learn how to organize. I mean, people should really read that Australian Green report to see what I'm talking about. We need to learn how to go out and talk to people we haven't talked to, one-on-one conversations, on doorsteps, phone calls, on the street, and, listen and relate what we're doing to their concerns, and, build a base of, counties should have a base of hundreds of activists, not just dozens. If, the good ones have dozens. But that's one goal. We're talking about putting out a manual for local elections. For local elections, it's pretty simple. Party labels don't matter that much. In California, you got nonpartisan. In New York, it's all partisan. But if you go out and knock on the door, talk to people, most people just gonna appreciate the fact that you talked and listened to them, because they don't hear from the major party candidates that way. And you get the names, and then you make sure of your supporters and make sure they vote on election day. I see too many green campaigns. They got great signage, nice Facebook and websites, but they don't go out and talk to people. So, that's the kind of thing we want to help. And then we want to keep our demands in the national spotlight. Not that we're going to get much from Biden, but Green New Deal, Medicare for all, job guarantee, new priorities in the federal budget. We got to keep raising those demands. It's going to bring people from the movements to us. And then we got to find campaigns locally. I think ranked choice voting is an idea whose time has come. There's a lot of energy all across the country on that. We won, 4 cities in 1 state in this last election. And the more we do that, including ranked choice from multi-member districts like Albany, California just adopted, that sets up proportional representation. That's a game changer for us. So, those are the kind of things we're going to talk about. And so we're going to set up a way for people to stay in touch and discuss these issues.
How can people get involved in your effort?
Go to the volunteer section of our website, howiehawkins.us, and in the comments say you want to be involved in these discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I have Chanel on stack and then Randy.
Go back to that vote on the Green New Deal. The thing that bothers me most about it, because people don't understand this. I read legislation for fun because I'm a nerd, but the actual Green New Deal that they proposed was a freaking resolution to create a committee to make a Green New Deal. And as someone that reads legislation for fun and knows a little bit how the government works, the Green New Deal as we propose it can be 1 or 2 omnibus pieces of federal legislation, but the Democratic Party is not about here trying to talk about that because they're trying to make it a discussion and then push it somewhere for people think that something happened and that they think that they're winning, when in actuality, they're putting it on a shelf so that it doesn't advance. We've seen the Democrats do this in California plenty of times with things like ranked choice voting, which was ready to pass here, but then the governor was like, nah. Or Medicare for all, which again was totally ready to pass here, but then Rendon was like, nah, putting this on a shelf in this section of the legislature. And I mean, it's gonna take some work for us to get to the point where we're able to explain these things to people. But honestly, the Appropriations Committee of the federal government can make us have a Green New Deal tomorrow if they wanted to, but they don't want to. That's why we have to get into every part of government and change things. With regard to these debates and stuff, you can change that by forcing them at a city council level, which is why we gotta get this local stuff together so we can make the changes we need to have the advances that we as a Green Party gotta have. So just thank y'all both for being here. And once again, thank you for putting up with me. Over.
Thank you, Chanel. Randy, go ahead.
So this is a question for both of you. Jill Stein, you were shut out of the debates when it came to between the Republicans and the Democrats. Howie, I didn't see you debate. They had a third-party debate, which very few channels carried. I'm assuming that both of you have some kind of challenges coming up to begin into debates and figure out when what the National Green Party is doing about that, the GPUSA. Have you heard anything about the debate issue? What you guys plan on doing about it?
Well, okay, I'll start. Yeah, I did go to 3 third-party debates organized by Free and Equal. They're online. I was the most prominent candidate. The Libertarian didn't show up either. Well, they did in the first one, which a bunch of Libertarians were at. That was last winter, and then there were 2 in the fall. But you're right. I mean, that's really a sideshow. It's the kiddie table to the real debate, which we know is a fraud. The Commission on Presidential Debates sounds like a government agency. In fact, it's a private corporation the two major parties control to keep people like us out. And we've sued and sued and sued, and basically federal government says it's a private corporation, they can do what they want, and the corporate media collaborates with them. I think in the future, we should push the League of Women Voters. We did this successfully in New York in the last gubernatorial race, to sponsor a debate, maybe with other civic organizations, and invite the candidates, and then pressure the corporate media not to be such lackeys to the two major parties. I mean, here in New York, the corporate media wouldn't broadcast a debate, even though the league did one without Cuomo, because he wouldn't come, because they want Cuomo, because he's, I guess in their mind, the person will get eyeballs on their tube and, political advertising in their coffers. But I think we got to go to the civic organizations. The website opendebates.org, I think that's it. George Farah has a lot of good information on this question if you really want to work on it.
And yeah, I'll just add that the legal basis for challenging debates has been changed. So even media is no longer required to give equal time. The protections for democratic dialogue are basically not there anymore. So it really is a matter of our creating our own institutions. And there's another organization, I think, called Open the Debates, which is advocating round the clock. You can find them on Facebook and on Twitter. They're run actually by a Green, Eli Beckerman. And they just try to seize every opportunity to push the issue and build the momentum, because people are really hungry for an open debate. I know in 2016, 75% of voters across the political spectrum were clamoring for more choices and more voices, as they still are, in debates and as political options. So, the momentum is there, it's with us, we just have to keep on it. And I think it applies to media across the board. We're excluded not only from debates, of course, we're greened out from media coverage of all sorts, especially by the so-called liberal media, which gave us some coverage in 2016, but basically blocked all coverage of Howie and Angela, almost all coverage. I don't remember you ever being on Democracy Now!, Howie. I don't know if I could have missed it, but yeah, they were, they wouldn't even acknowledge our candidate in Maine, our Senate candidate, where there's a ranked choice race. And they wouldn't even acknowledge that there was ranked choice voting going on there. So, the progressive and so-called progressive intelligentsia, like Chanel was saying, they've totally bought in to this politics of the elite. So we have to keep the pressure on. I think the more we can develop our media, independent green media, the better. And there's some discussion percolating among people who worked on Howie's campaign for how we can keep that momentum going and how we can build some new communications efforts that help kind of build critical mass among the different resources we have, because people are really hungry for it now.
People on stack right now will go to Orlando, then Ann Minash, and then Chris Richardson. Please be ready to unmute yourself when it's your turn and keep your comments to a minute.
And Eric Stack as well.
Orlando Stack.
Go ahead, Orlando, you're next.
Blessings. I had a deep question for Jill and Howie. What is some great tactics that you use for the African-American community, even with the Black Lives Matter, to disfranchise racism when it comes to the Green Party, when there's not enough African-Americans that's in the party?
Yeah, one of the things we're doing here in my home state is working with a broad coalition of anti-racist, anti-white supremacy forces. There's a group called the New Democracy Coalition, and they are one of the few organized groups in the Boston area that is really keeps their distance from the organized political establishment. so they are not biased, and we are trying to be there as much as possible to support them. In particular, we're working on ending the naming of our preeminent tourist institution, to change it from the name of a slave trader and a slave holder, that is Faneuil Hall. We're trying to change it to Freedom Hall, or maybe Frederick Douglass Hall, or something on that order. So we're organizing together and we're supporting them. And, you know, this is, in my mind, this is like exactly how you build coalitions on the ground. And then once you are, you know, bonded in the trenches, then it's pretty easy to move from there. And I have to say, our party, which is a merger of the Green Party and the original Rainbow Coalition Party, we sort of began with that effort with the help of Mel King, who was one of the, you know, he was almost became mayor of Boston way back when, and he helped found the party. So we've kind of made a real effort to, you know, to fight white supremacy and to just have it in our bones as much as possible. But you're absolutely right, Orlando. Everything pushes us, you know, to be a campaign and a, you know, a network. You know, forces of white supremacy are dividing us all the time, internally as well as externally, and we just have to be fighting them all the time.
Well, I think this gets back to organizing. You know, a lot of groups. There one in California. I'm part of an extended Black family. I had a niece and her fiance got them to a council meeting, and the people there were like, "Where did you come from?" You know, and they were excited. And then I called back my niece and fiance, you know, a couple months later and said, "Have you been in more meetings?" They said, "They didn't tell us when they are, but I know they got their information." So that's partly being conscious, but beyond that, this is where, you know, predominantly white group will say, "Well, we need Black folks. Let's go invite them to this demonstration." And they go out and leaflet, and the Black folks are like, "Who the hell are you?" You know, we need to go out and talk to people. And actually, the best model, I think, was the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. I witnessed this coming up, and they got everybody's attention with the law book and the shotgun following the police. But then where they really won people over is they got a stoplight at Salem Elementary School in the north side, where the community wanted a stoplight. Kids were getting run over. So the Panthers went out there with the rifle on their shoulder, but they were directing traffic. And they showed up, the police, and the council got a stoplight right down there. And people said, "Hey, these guys can get stuff done." And then where did they get their programs for? They had a storefront on Shattuck Avenue. And people would walk in and say, "We got a problem with sickle cell anemia, or we're seniors and we're getting mugged from the time we cash our Social Security check to go to the grocery store." Or the breakfast program. All this stuff didn't come from out of the head of Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. It came from the community. So that's where I say, if we're going to organize, and we need to target, you know, people of color, young people, that's where the energy is. Most of the messaging we're getting post-campaign are teenagers. They're like saying, "Keep going. You know, we got to fight for our futures on the climate and our economic opportunities and racial justice and working class people." So, you know, locals should have an organizing plan. How are we going to become majority in our town or city? What neighborhoods are likely to be with us? And how do we go out and start organizing them systematically? It's an ongoing process of reaching out in a particular way. And that's what we're calling deep canvassing. That Australian Greens article doesn't use that phrase. It's more an American community organizing parlance. But I think that's what's going to take. Plus, the Green Party should have enough resources that it can hire Black field organizers to go around and, you know, identify where stuff's going on and begin to relate what they're doing to what the Green Party's doing. You know, it's key, you know, because, you know, Black folks and Latinos, particularly Chicanos in the Southwest, are huge voting blocks that the Democrats take for granted. They ain't getting nothing from the system. And we're the logical answer for them. But we got to build relationships. You can't just preach to people. You got to listen and you know, build trust.
Thank you, Howie. Go ahead, Anne, with your question.
Hi. Actually, there's a couple of comments and wanting feedback on. One is, I think local issues are really important, and the one that I'm most involved in through my job is homelessness, and that's a big one. And I think we're the only ones that have any answers to that as far as political parties are concerned. There are activists that agree with us, but I think that's important. Medicare for all, or the equivalent in California, that's really important because the Democrats have sold us out so many times. They only pass it when they know it'll be vetoed by the Republican governor. When they have power, they happen. So I think that, especially with this pandemic, it's extremely important to raise that as central issues in campaigns and in our work. Third, on a national scale, the Equal Rights Amendment, which has already been approved by the requisite number of states in the country, and basically the Biden administration, as I understand it, could authorize the archivist to register it. Don't think he will. This is something the Green Party should be raising on a national level. There's a huge number of women who are very excited and care about this, and women, of course, have disproportionately suffered during the pandemic and are burdened more than men are. And so it's a very important issue as well. So that's my comments. I'm interested to see what Jill and Howie think of those things. Thanks.
Go ahead, Howie, I'll follow you.
Well, they're all good issues. I think particularly housing, with all the evictions we're facing, the crisis we were in before the pandemic, the rent is too damn high, and it's a huge problem. And you know, our program was build public housing until everybody has an affordable option. And there are a lot of other things we can do with that. You know, clean buildings, you know, that are powered by clean energy and are efficient. We can use them to desegregate our residential segregate. I was surprised when I was in California. It's more segregated than when I was coming up. I mean, I was going to communities that are all white or all black or all Asian or all Latino. I was in East LA. I never saw another white person in a week. I was there, really. Saw a couple of black people. Everybody else was Latino. I stopped off in a place in the East Bay. Everybody was Asian. I mean, it's astounding. So you can by having mixed income help desegregate. So I think housing is a huge issue. You mentioned ERA, of course. And I think, you know, going back to what people were saying about the Green New Deal, we can have local Green New Deals. I think particularly with public power, you know, get PG&E out of your, you know, your town, have a municipal power utility, and then you have the power to pick clean energy and build the smart grid and all those things. So, and I think that's where it's going to be at for us the next 4 years, because the Biden administration is, I think, going to be impenetrable, particularly with McConnell as co-president. So that's where it's at, the local issues.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. And Anne, I think you're exactly right. Housing, healthcare, and, you know, gender economic oppression. These are huge issues, and healthcare, especially now in the face of a pandemic, and Biden's, you know, his solution really is technical. It's like, let's provide masks and you know, contact tracing, but he's really not talking about the long-term economic support in the European countries. You know, they don't have the economic crisis that we do because they just decided across the board, almost all of the members of the EU decided to just replace all wages and provide it across the board to all businesses to replace wages. So it basically kept their economy alive, even though it's on hold. And we have now, you know, this health crisis compounding an economic crisis, which makes everybody resist the solution to the health crisis, because few people can afford to just not go to work or find a way to take care of their kids when their kids aren't in school. So if we don't address them both, we can't really fix either of them. And I haven't seen the Biden administration give any kind of commitment to a real economic plan to address COVID. And one of his leading economic advisors has basically said, oh, we can't afford it. You know, we're not gonna go have another economic bailout. We're not gonna do whatever it's called, the repeat of the CARES Act. We're not going to do it, which is like a complete and total disaster. And, our hospitals are being overrun, which means that the healthcare system basically goes into shutdown. And it's not only COVID that we can't treat anything else. So all serious conditions, we basically revert to kind of an undeveloped status without healthcare system. So, this really is at an emergency level, and, it's great. I hadn't heard that Biden could essentially instruct the archivist to authorize the Equal Rights Amendment. That would be a great one for us to jump on. And I would add to that, student debt, that Biden also has the power to basically eliminate student debt on day one by executive order, because the government owns like 95% of that debt. So there are incredible things that he could do. And again, you have this kind of clash of how catastrophic these problems are, for everyday people, this tsunami of evictions that like 40% of renters are at risk for, and small homeowners, small businesses, 100,000 restaurants have already gone out of business. I mean, this is an all-out collapse that's happening right now in slow motion, and it's not really being covered because it's sort of under the radar and it's pending, but it's really happening. 8 million more people just went into poverty since the CARES Act additional unemployment support ended. And there's more that's going to end at the end of December, right after Christmas. Another 12 million people, I think, are going to lose their economic support. So it's like we are in real competition right now with the Great Depression. It's just less visible and it's not being covered, but it's here, and it really gives us enormous leverage now if we can be out there advocating for the right thing at the local level. This is sort of a perfect storm for a massive political transition right now.
Thank you both very much for your perspectives. I think we're going to Chris Richardson. Please unmute and keep your comment very short, and then Eric Brooks, and then we have Bill Balderston on stack. Chris Richardson, go ahead. Okay, let's move on to Eric Brooks, and then we'll get back to Chris.
Yeah, two quick comments. One is I want to reiterate what Howie said about, if we want people of color and marginalized communities to be more involved with the Green Party, we need to do what the Black Panthers did. We need to go into those communities and help them put up programs to help those communities. And we need to get legislation passed at the local, state, and national level that actually provides programs for those people, so that they know if they get involved with Greens, it's actually gaining something for them on the ground in their very difficult lives because of how they're marginalized. And then I wanted to get to this issue of the spoiler effect and how I think that, but to preface that, I would say, I think that even though we got a pretty small percentage of the vote because of this whole Trump is Satan thing, I think it's very important to remember that this election was incredibly close. Much closer than anyone thought it was going to be. And the reason it was close is because people like the Greens and other progressives were out there saying, this system is broken. It doesn't do you any good to vote for these corporate warmongering Democrats. And what I would like to see happen more from us as Greens is to get away from Ralph Nader's tactic of when they say we spoiled the election, trying to show them the mathematics that prove that didn't happen, and actually own the fact that our voice out there, even if we're not beating them at the ballot and causing them to lose at the ballot, actually is hurting the corporate Democrats' chances of getting, of losing, and that's okay. That they're such a mess that that's what needs to happen until things change. And I think if we gravitate toward that frame around that issue, they're not going to believe us when we argue with them about the mathematics anyway. If we just get out there and just say, yep, you bet, we're part of the reason your Democrat, corporate warmongering Democrat didn't win, and we're going to keep being part of the reason until things change. So if both of you could speak to that.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say in my experience, and I was first tricked into running for office in the year 2000, and I don't quite have as much experience as Howie, but maybe I'm number two. A lot depends on who you're talking to, and there are so many ways to punch back at the spoiler argument, which is, you know, in my view, it's really arrogant to say that those votes belonged to anybody. And it usually pisses people off when they recognize, oh my God, they think that they owned my vote. They don't own your vote, they have to earn your vote. And I find that that has a lot of wide appeal, and people really resonate with that right away. You don't have to convince anybody, they just kind of get it. That's a really arrogant statement. The other thing I often say is that that is really, that is essentially it's a propaganda campaign to smear political opposition. You know, how much did we see the libertarian being smeared as the spoiler in this election? How much did we see their votes counted against, you know, Biden's margin? It really didn't happen at all, you know, which just tells you how much that this argument is just kind of a weapon. The spoiler argument is a weapon that's being used by the political establishment, mainly Democrats, to silence their opposition. And, you know, you can talk through the numbers if you want, but only, you know, there's not a lot of people who are going to follow those numbers, and there are many ways to combat it. The other way I find really important is to point out that the whole argument is just off base, that why in the world can we not bring our values to our vote? Why should we be voting against who we fear rather than for who we support? If you can't have a values dimension in our elections, when can we bring our values to bear in our political system? And I find people tend to get that a lot. And then when they hear that ranked choice voting makes the spoiler hysteria obsolete, it makes it go away, and it gives you your, you know, your essential right, your birthright to vote and to vote freely. And fear mongering against one candidate or another, or against green, is just another form of voter suppression. We should be able to vote for what we want. Ranked choice voting allows us to do that, and being able to explain it succinctly, I find, is really helpful. You know, New York City just adopted ranked choice voting in the past year. That's in addition to the state of Maine. 5 additional cities adopted it this past election. It didn't get adopted in Massachusetts, and I can tell you pretty much why that is. I think it had an awful lot to do with COVID and the fact that you can't have a lot of face-to-face conversations. So, you know, voting in the kind of winner-take-all, fear-based voting system, strategic voting, is kind of what people are used to. It takes a lot of explaining. And in the state of Maine, they did a lot of games. They went into bars and they said, we're going to have a ranked choice vote on what kind of beer, you know, what's your favorite beer? And it showed people how really simple and intuitive it is, and it passed. We didn't get to do that here in Massachusetts. And, you know, I think the momentum is still there. There's a new organization called rankthevote.org, which helped get the referendum going here in Massachusetts. And they now have initiatives going in 10 other states. You can contact them. I'm sorry, it's rankthevote.us. I'll put that in the chat. And they will help you anywhere get something going. And to my mind, that has been the most powerful argument to just change the channel entirely. This is not a battle we should have to fight. We have a right to vote, and people really resonate with that when they hear about it.
Yeah, Eric, I would phrase it a little different. I get in trouble sometimes because I do acknowledge there's a spoiler problem or a potential for it. I think we should acknowledge the problem, not so much own it. And that leads into ranked choice voting. You want to solve it? But here's the solution. You damn Democrats, that's what I was saying. When they said I was spoiling the election, I said, no, it's the Democrats. We've been given a proven nonpartisan solution for 2 decades. Replace the Electoral College with a national popular vote using ranked choice voting. And damn Bill McKibben told me to drop out and campaign for that instead of running for office, as if the Democrats were going to raise it. I don't know what Bill did, but I didn't hear Biden talk about it. So, that's why we got to run. Now, but we also have to, deal with the facts. If you get into a deeper conversation, we do have an exit poll. The exit polls from 2016 showed that 61% of Jill's voters would have stayed home if she wasn't on the ballot. You plug that number into Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, wouldn't change the result. So, but that doesn't stop them from, blaming us. We got 400,000 votes. That's probably what's going to turn out. We just hit 390,000 in the AP count. New York still has 16% to count. That's got to be worth at least 5,000 more for us. And then you got write-in votes. I know we got 1,000 in Wisconsin, and we got some big states like Georgia and Virginia. So we're going to get right around 400,000. None of those votes were wayward Democrats, not this year. That's that independent left that supported the Green Party. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. So, let's keep that in mind. But the spoiler thing's going around. It's already coming out in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where the Democrats in Wisconsin flat out broke the law to knock us off the ballot and got a trivial thing to do it in Pennsylvania, where the judges, as it went through the courts, strictly partisan hacks, whether it was election boards or election commissions or courts. If you were a Republican, you voted to put us on. If you're a Democrat, you voted to put us off. The facts and the law didn't make any damn difference. What kind of country has the ruling parties administering their own elections? Only in the United States. So that's an issue. But now they're saying in Pennsylvania, oh, Biden won Pennsylvania because we knocked Howie and Angela off the ballot. And they lost down ballot statewide races because the Greens did good. They weren't knocked off the ballot. And so they're blaming the Greens for spoiling the Democrats in Pennsylvania. And and they're bragging in Wisconsin, the same thing, that because we weren't on, Biden narrowly won Wisconsin. So this thing's going to go on. The other thing about party suppression, which is a form of voter suppression, the Democrats, think about that. They are suppressing, the most fullest expression of our First Amendment rights, free speech, petitioning the government for redress of grievances, getting our word out through the free press. And the Democrats hypocritically condemn the Republicans who deserve to be condemned, but then they practice it themselves. And read Greg Palast stuff. Why the hell didn't the Democrats in Michigan, for example, restore voters that were purged by the Republicans? There's a theory about that. They're afraid of the Black Democrats in states like Georgia and Michigan. And they want to use that voter suppression to undermine people like Bernie Sanders. So the Democrats don't have clean hands in this at all. But the main thing is, I think it all leads toward pushing ranked choice voting, including for multi-member districts for our legislative bodies. There's a bill in Congress, the Fair Amendment Act or Fair Representation Act, that we should be pressuring all these so-called Democratic Socialists in Congress, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, to co-sponsor. I'll tell you, in New York, we actually didn't get ranked choice voting in the general election in New York City. The parties made it for their primaries. And then in the general, and it was only Greens in the public hearings saying you got to go to the general. All these so-called DSA socialists weren't there. And the socialists in the legislature that passed this law that tripled the votes we needed, doubled the frequency, and tripled the signatures we need to get back on the ballot, been completely silent in the suppression of the Green Party. And so ranked choice voting, that's got to be a key issue for us.
Thank you very much. We are at the end. We've arrived at the end of our session, just a couple of minutes past. We are going into a break right now. We were going to take some photos. So I know we have 3 other questions or comments. If you'd like to share those in the chat, that will be recorded. But let's go ahead and thank our amazing guest who joined us. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your time, sharing your perspective and passion. And thank you, Laura.